All right, thanks for attending another SLG Azure Fridays event. Today I'm going to be talking about building bots, and these are intelligent bots using natural language conversation and artificial intelligence. Now we're seeing a lot of interest from our state and local government customers around building bots and being able to deploy them to maybe be part of their website, maybe be able to interact through other mediums such as text messaging or maybe through Facebook or other means. And it's really to allow organizations to reach citizens where they actually are. So allowing people to interact in a way that feels natural to them. And one of the things that I hear a lot of times is, well, why can't we just use the search engine on a website? Isn't a bot just kind of like a search engine? It just goes and looks up information and brings stuff back. Well, a search engine usually doesn't have language intelligence behind it, where it can really understand the intent of the question. And also, a lot of times, search engines are covering such a wide range of topics that getting that exact answer for a person is difficult. Also, a search engine can't be interactive. And so, one of the nice things about bots is that we can be very interactive. We can have a conversation. So not only can we have a person ask a question, the bot can respond back to get clarifying answers or ask some additional information and then maybe even go look up data in a back-end line of business system. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today is how do we go about getting started building these bots and using some of these cognitive services, as we call them, to be able to enhance our bots to make them smarter. So I always like to start off with just describing what is a bot so that everybody's kind of on a level playing field. And a bot is nothing more than an application. And it's an application that enables users to interact in a conversational way. So using natural language. Instead of pressing buttons or doing quick keyword searches, it's more of a true natural language conversation. Now, bots communicate in many different ways. Language is obviously one of them, but we can also do it through images. And that's kind of an interesting concept. And I'm going to demo that today a little bit later on how a bot could also take an image and get some insight and information out of that image and can help your bot maybe prompt a user to go down a different path to get the information that the individual needs. So a bot could be very simple, just a pattern matching. Any developers out there could do if statements. If someone types this specific word or phrase, then respond with this information. And, that works to an extent, but the problem is that you're really, really expecting your end users to speak in a very specific way or ask questions in a very specific way, and it feels very robotic, basically. It feels very constrained. And so we want to break past that, just this if-then type of pattern, and allow people to speak in a more natural way to their bot and be able to get information back. Now, as you can imagine, that's in itself is a pretty big challenge. And so what are the different components of a bot? So if we're building a bot, what do we need to think about? Well, first of all, like I said, a bot is nothing more than an application. It's just custom code that you write that's exposed as an API. So it's a REST endpoint that other components can talk to it through. Okay, so a bot has a very specific, what we call a contract for interfacing with it. And that way outside systems can communicate with the bot, and then the bot can do the processing of the work and then return the results back to the systems that call it. Now, this custom code is commonly built with what we call our Bot Builder SDK. So it's something that you can download. It works with many different languages. I primarily work in .NET, so it makes it very easy to just go into Visual Studio, and I can create a new web project since we're going to be creating a RESTful API endpoint. And then what I could do is install the Bot Builder SDK through NuGet Package Manager. There's also lots of documentation about building bots on Microsoft's website, and I'm going to give some links here at the end, where you can actually get templates for Visual Studio that you can then go through and create projects with that template, and it kind of jump starts that whole process and makes it very simple. So we have to have this custom code. The other thing that we need to have is something called the Microsoft Bot Framework. Now, the Bot Framework is kind of a middleware, and the middleware is intended to connect to your communication endpoints, like Facebook, web chat, Skype, SMS, or text messaging. And the idea is that the bot framework understands how to talk to all of those things, and then it also knows how to talk to your bot based on that original contract, the bot contract that's defined by the Bot Builder SDK. So what this allows you to do as a developer, focus just on building your bot and the logic and the intelligence of your bot, and not worry about how it communicates to the outside world. We let the bot framework handle that for you. So you build your bot once, and then you can connect it to all of these different endpoints through what we call the bot framework. And we'll see that here in a little bit. So there's some other tools that Microsoft makes available to help jumpstart your bot development. And one of them is called Q&A Maker. So Q&A Maker allows you to start with a bunch of frequently asked questions. And they could be on a website, they could be in a structured document, or they could be just manually entered into the Q&A Maker system. And what Q&A Maker allows you to do is have those frequently asked questions put into a system that is then analyzed using linguistics, artificial intelligence, and it builds a model, and then it publishes that model to a REST endpoint. So basically what this does is it does a lot of that linguistic work for you, so that when a person submits a question to your bot can then relay that question to Q&A Maker, let Q&A Maker try to understand the intent of the question, see if there's a question in the Q&A portion, and if it can find a question that matches the intent of what the person was asking and it has high confidence value of that, then it can go ahead and return back the answer. And the interesting thing is that Q&A Maker, when it returns back the information, it returns back, here's the most probable question and answer pair in Q&A Maker that matches what the person was asking, and here's the confidence level as a percentage of how confident Q&A Maker is that it was able to return back the right answer for what the person was asking. So it makes it really easy to build kind of a shell of a bot just using the Bot Builder SDK and have it call out to Q&A Maker to actually do some of that intelligence. So this is where we're starting to use some of the cognitive services. So we're not hard coding if-then statements inside of our bot. We're using some artificial intelligence to come back and provide some examples. So let me go ahead and demo this. So I need to share my desktop. So I'm going to switch this over, and it's going to take a moment for it to come up. So I'll give it a second here. Going to refresh my screen. All right. So this is a Q&A Maker, and you get to it through the URL qnamaker.ai. So Q&A Maker is very, very simple. First of all, you have to log in with either a Microsoft account or an organizational account. Now, an organizational account would be an account that you have through Office 365 or some other Microsoft online service. Once you have that account, you could come in and say create new service, and it's very, very simple. You give your service a name, and it can be any name that you want, and you can change it at any time. This is just kind of more for reference, so you know what your, the purpose of your question and answers pairs are. Then you can come down here to URLs. Just drop in a URL to a website that you have publicly facing that already has a frequently asked questions on it. And then you can add multiple links if you would like. Now, it's best to only add Q&A pairs for a specific type of topic. And then that way you might have different Q&A Maker services for different topics. So some people might have multiple FAQ pages for different topics or categories. You'd kind of do the same thing here. You'd create a new service for each one of those different topics or categories, would be the more likely way that you would want to handle this. If you add a bunch of FAQs here that are kind of talking about different things, your quality of the data that gets returned might not be as good, or you might have to spend a little bit more time, what we call training your model. But it's pretty simple. Just add your URLs here, or if you have a document, PDF document, an Excel spreadsheet, etc., just click select files and you can upload that. Or if you don't have any of those, you can just start from scratch and just manually enter in questions and answers. You come down here, hit create, and that's all it takes. So that will build a Q&A maker model for you. Now, let me show you one that I've created already. So if I come back to my services, and I've got this one called Demo Bot, and I'm going to click on the pencil icon here. And you're going to see that all of the Q&A pairs show up here. So we've got the question on the left, the answer on the right. Now these at the top are what are called editorial, and you see here it says original source editorial. That basically means that I came in here and manually entered these in by clicking on this add new Q&A pair. So if I have questions and answers that are not in a original source someplace, I can just come in here and manually add them. But down here I have a website which is actually for the city of Chicago, and it talks about parking tickets. And so these are frequently asked questions about parking tickets in the city of Chicago. And so I just pointed it at that URL. It pulls in all of the questions and the answers. Now you might want to go through the list after you've done an import. Just read through them, make sure that everything came in correctly and looks appropriate. But once you've done that, you just hit the Save and Retrain button. And what this is going to do is retrain your model so that it's kind of builds its smarts. And then over here on the left, we can go to Test. And Test is going to give us a little chat window. And we can start asking questions in this chat window. Now, as we ask questions, we're going to get responses. So here you can see the question hi was asked, and it responded to hello. So there's a couple of things that can happen here. With hi, I can say, are there alternate ways that someone might say hi? Well, there is. Hi, hello, how are you, etc. And so what I can do is click over here to this alternatives, and I can add additional alternative phrasings for the questions that I'm asking. Over here, it shows what the response was. It was hello. Is this the appropriate response in this case? Well, yes, in this case it is. But if it wasn't, I could actually come over here and choose none of the above, or it may give me some alternatives out of the FAQ answer list that might be appropriate based upon its confidence levels. And so I can choose those. So by coming in here and just kind of interacting with my bot, I can train it a little bit better and get a better understanding of how it's going to respond to people's questions. So once again, this is all done in Q&A Maker. Once we're done, we hit the Publish button. The Publish button is going to give us a list of what we've got. So how many questions and answers do we have? How many have been added? How many have been deleted? Once we're ready to publish this, we just hit Publish. Now this is published and it's made available to be able to be called through a RESTful API endpoint. And it gives all of the information here that a developer needs to be able to call this service remotely. So, whoops, I think I just closed the window. Let me double check here. Sorry about that. There we go. And so, when this comes back up here, you'll see that all that information there the developer needs, you just hand this off to the developer. They can then go into the bot that they're creating with the Bot Builder SDK and say that bot needs to make a call out to the Q&A maker using this RESTful web service information. And then that way your custom coded bot will send over to Q&A maker the question. Q&A maker will respond back with the appropriate response along with its confidence level. Okay, so very, very kind of simple way to get started with creating a bot. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to our slide deck here. It should load here in just a second. All right. So I talked a little bit about the Bot Builder SDK. The Bot Builder SDK is the code and kind of the definition of what your custom coded bot needs to adhere to. And so we've got a NuGet package. If you're a C# developer, there's a NuGet package called Microsoft.bot.builder that you can just install using Visual Studio. If you use things like Node or other languages, you can use npm or whatever the package manager is for that type of language, and we probably have a package out there for that. Now, you don't have to necessarily use these Bot Builder packages directly, because this is all just REST API endpoints that you're exposing. As long as you follow the appropriate pattern when building your bot, no matter what language, it will work with our bot services. Okay. Now, I've got a link here that's available. So docs.microsoft.com/en-us/bot framework/bot builder overview get started. Kind of a long link there, but that will get you to the place where you can read more about the bot framework itself, and it kind of walks through for the different languages how to get started with that. All right, so something else that we have made available is called the Bot Framework Emulator. And this is really important for developers because what you want the developers to do is, once again, focus on building the bot and building the intelligence of the bot, and not necessarily worrying about wiring it up to all of the different endpoints. So what the Bot Framework Emulator is it's a desktop application that allows it to connect to your bot's REST API endpoint so that you can ask questions, upload pictures, whatever it happens to be, how your bot interacts, and be able to then get responses back. So it's a way for developers to quickly build bots and test bots without having to publish them anywhere. You don't have to put them in the cloud. You don't have to connect them to other services. It's just a quick way to do that. So in the right there, you can kind of see a window of the Bot Framework Emulator. At the top in the blue bar, it says localhost :3978/API/messages. That's the endpoint of your custom built bot. So your REST API bot that you've created that's running on your local computer for debugging purposes. And once it's connected, then down at the bottom, you can type in your chat messages to your bot and see what your bot's responses are. Over in the right gives you the details of the information that's being passed to the bot and information coming back. And then, of course, there's a log there. So it helps you see how your bot's reacting and how it's interacting with the custom code, and help you debug if you run into any issues. So the Bot Framework Emulator is a must-have. I've got a link there in this document for it. Very easy to find too if you just search for Bot Framework Emulator. So if you're a developer, you want the Bot Builder SDK, and you want the Bot Framework Emulator. Those are two things that are pretty important. All right, so then we have something called the Bot Framework, and I talked about this earlier. The Bot Framework is the component that is the middleware that talks to all of the public-facing services, whether it's Skype, whether it's just a web chat, whether it's Facebook or text messaging. There's a bunch of different endpoints that you can have your bot talk to. So this is kind of that middleware. So it talks to the endpoints, and then it then translates it to talk to your bot based on the definitions defined through the Bot Builder SDK. So to get started, you go out to dev.botframework.com and you log in once again with a Microsoft account, and you're going to create a new bot out there. And when you do it, you're going to say you want to register an existing bot built using the Bot Builder SDK. So basically you're saying, I want to register a bot that I've already built, and then you're going to complete the form. And basically the form is going to ask, what's the URL to the bot that you just created? So when you get to this point where you have the Microsoft Bot Framework and you want to configure this, you must have already published your bot, that API, somewhere publicly. It has to be either on a server hosted on premises with port 80 exposed and port 443, because it actually uses SSL. So it's actually SSL. So port 443, making sure that that is exposed to the internet, or hosted in the cloud someplace on a web server with port 443 exposed, so that the bot framework can communicate to that. So once you've got your bot hosted someplace, then you can go into the bot framework, configure it, and then tell the bot framework what are those endpoints you want your bot to communicate on, whether it is the web endpoint, Skype, Facebook, Twitter, etc., or not Twitter, SMS. All right, so now let's say that you've got a basic bot up. So we've got some basic code It's talking to the Q&A maker. We've got it tied into the bot framework. It's out there on the public side for citizen facing, and there people are coming in asking, frequently asked questions types of questions against your bot. And that's the quickest and easiest way to get started, by the way, is to kind of go down that path. But at some point, you're going to want to expand your bot to do more than just frequently asked questions. You might want it to be able to interact with maybe back-end line of business systems. And the Q&A maker can't do that. It's just a static, here's a question, here's an answer. If you want dynamic content, we have to extend our bot. Well, this is where things get more challenging because we need to create a language model for our bot so it can understand what the intent is of the person's request as they type it into the bot or if they upload an image. And then the other part of it is we need to understand the entities within that statement that enhances the information of the intent. So for example, if I were to type to a bot, what is the weather today? Okay, what is my intent? Well, my intent is weather forecast, right? So I want my bot to understand that if somebody says, what is the weather today? That what I'm really wanting it to do is go out and get the weather forecast for my current location. But if I say, what is the weather today in Chicago, Illinois? Well, then I want my bot to say, the person's asking for the weather, but the entity is actually Chicago, Illinois. So now I know what the person wants, and I know the parameters, I guess you could say, of what I need to work with in order to get the right data. So we create this intent and this entities relationship through something we call LUIS, L-U-I-S. It's the Language Understanding Intelligent Service. And so what this allows us to do is go out there and define these different intents. And the way that we do it, very simple. We just type in our questions that we want our bot to be able to respond to. So if it is like a weather bot, something like, what is the forecast? What is the forecast in a city? Or what is the forecast in city state? Or what is the forecast in, and then a zip code? Or what is the weather going to be tomorrow? So what I would do is go through and think about all the different statements and the ways that I might ask the question. And I'm going to feed that into LUIS. And then I'm going to tell LUIS, here is a series of questions, and these questions all fit this specific intent, which is get forecast. And then I'm going to go through each one of those statements, and I'm going to say, here are the entities. So the ones that maybe defined a city-state or a city or maybe a zip code, those are going to be my entities. And I'm going to highlight that inside of LUIS. Now I'm going to show you this in a moment because I know this is very kind of nebulous. But once you do that, then this builds an AI model to understand the language patterns that it should be understanding as a specific intent and as a specific entity. And now a person doesn't have to say something in a very specific order. They could say it slightly different, in a different way, and LUIS will understand what their intent was, and then it will work to pull out the entities out of that so that your bot then has the intent and the entity collection so that it can then go and make calls out to other systems to be able to get the answer. So LUIS is a great technology. We also have a lot of other interesting technologies through cognitive services. One of them is face detection. So I talked about uploading photos and being able to do things with photos and pull information out of them. So if we upload a photo like of a face, we can identify who the people are in those photos. How many people are in there? What's their gender, age, what's their emotional status, etc. We can pull all of that out just from photos. We've got all sorts of other things like being able to do emotions. So are they angry? Are they happy? We can do things like content moderation. Now, content moderation is really interesting, especially when we're talking about bots, because there's a couple things that can happen. Number one, somebody might post something that's extremely offensive. And you probably don't want to store something that's extremely offensive as an image on your file server or in a database someplace. So let's have content moderation that can look for profanity or offensive images, adult content, and automatically just not deal with it. Just ignore it, not store it anywhere, maybe respond to the person that they shouldn't be posting that kind of information to the bot. But it's a great way to kind of protect yourself. But the second bullet point here is also a very interesting one. Being able to detect potential PII, personally identifiable information. This is really important because if you're dealing with things like maybe it's a Secretary of State, and the bot is allowing people to ask questions maybe about driver's license renewals and stuff like that. The last thing you want is someone to ask a question and drop their social security number in there. And then you accidentally store that in a database or in a log that's not properly protected for that type of data. So having content moderation can actually help you from a compliance perspective too. So that's something to think about as you're going through this. And so Azure Cognitive Services actually has a content moderation feature that you can enable and utilize. Custom vision. I'm going to show this one off in just a moment here. Custom image allows you to do state-of-the-art image processing and build your own custom models to help your bot actually identify what the heck is in a picture. So we have some basic vision models, like I said, the facial recognition. There's also ones that will help identify general objects that are in an image and maybe give you kind of an idea, almost like a sentence that describes what the picture looks like. But in this case, this is about you taking images that are important to whatever your line of business is, feeding it into there, and then tagging those images with specific tags that describe what's important to you in those images. Once you've done that and you've put a minimum of 5 images per tag in there, you can train the model. And then what you can do is as people send up new images, it can run it through the model and say, what's the probability that this image matches any of these tags? And then retrieve that information back. So I'm going to give you an example of that here in just a moment of how we can use a custom vision API through Cognitive Services and use a bot as the front end to all of this to provide some 311 basic services to an organization in kind of a unique way. We've got a ton of other cognitive services that are out there that can help. For example, translator. We've got a lot of states that have to deal with bilingual, a lot of times it's Spanish, and doing English or Spanish translation. And most of the time, the people that are building these services might not necessarily be bilingual, or you're not able to keep every single piece of content in both languages. So being able to use something like a translator service to allow your bot to automatically detect the language that the person's speaking in, and then translate all of those calls appropriately through your bot. And when the response comes back, translate it back to the language that the person's speaking. So that can be very helpful. Spell checker is also very helpful. So if you want to make sure or try to help people as they're asking questions, if there's a possibility that they're going to misspell things quite frequently, to be able to maybe automatically use a spell checker to kind of try to help them have the right spellings of words, so that way your bot can respond correctly. We can do things like text analytics. So basically being able to take the information that they're typing in, and do sentiment analysis on it. So what if somebody's typing to your bot and they're typing because they're angry? They're mad about something, they're unhappy with the interaction that they've had with an organization or something like that. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to detect the sentiment of the comments or the text that they're putting into the bot as either being positive or negative, and how far on the scale each way, and then being able to maybe react to that. So if the bot realizes that somebody seems to be getting frustrated or angry, that maybe it provides an alternative way to talk to someone else. Maybe route the person to maybe a live person someplace, but maybe give them a phone number or an email address that they can talk to. So there's lots of different services that you could use to really build out your bot and make it very, very smart. Like I said, by default, a bot is nothing more than a simple API, and the intelligence of the bot is built by the developer by using things like cognitive services and being able to expand its language capabilities and expand its understanding capabilities. So let's go ahead and take a look at this 311 bot demo that I've got. So I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop here real quick. And let's see here. All right, so in just a moment, if it hasn't come up already, you should be seeing a browser window with something that says 311 bot demo. So the 311 bot demo is, once again, just a very basic example of a bot that I built. It's hosted on a Azure App Service plan, and I'm using the bot framework to provide a web-based chat window for me to interact with my bot. So if I come out here and just do hello, now it's going to take a second because my bot has actually probably fallen asleep. Normally in a production environment, you wouldn't have the resources automatically deprovisioned, but I do to kind of keep my costs down here. So it took a second for that to come up, but I say hello, it responds back hello. I could ask it something like, can I use a credit card to pay a parking ticket? Okay. Remember that FAQ from City of Chicago? Uh-oh, sorry, my bot is having issues. What is going on? Let me try to reload this. Let's try this again. And if we have problems, I will have to move on this. I just tested it too, so we'll try it again. Can I pay a ticket with a credit card? If it's going to give us problems, we might have to. There we go. So it must have just fell asleep and needed some prompting. So there we go. So it says you can pay multiple tickets with one credit card provided you do not exceed the $1,500 limit or repeat the use of the same credit card within a 3-day period. So this, can I pay a ticket with a credit card? That question does not exist in the frequently asked questions. But because it understood the intent that I wanted to pay a ticket and credit card, that it was able to use the model that was built with Q&A Maker, which was here. If I go back to Edit Service, it was able to identify the answer out of the list of questions and answers that I've got in here. So it's really kind of cool. So what it did is it passed off the question to Q&A Maker, and Q&A Maker found the response and responded back. And then what I did in my bot was actually to say, does this exceed a certain confidence threshold? Because I only want to return a response back to the actual user if my bot is confident that it got the right answer. So I might set an 80 or 85% confidence threshold to say, you know what, you have to be at least 80 to 85% confident or higher to be able to respond back. Otherwise, just tell them you don't know. So that's one example where I can query things and get frequently asked questions. But what if I wanted to do something more interesting with a 311 bot? Let me click this here. You see, this is like an image. So imagine I'm on a mobile device and I'm out driving around on the road and I hit a pothole. And I'm really upset and angry, so I take a picture of the pothole on my mobile phone. I open up the website on my mobile phone. I click the little item here, and it'll open up my list of images on my mobile phone, and I go ahead and say, there's that dang pothole that I just hit, that I just took a picture of, and I send it to the bot. The bot received it, and the bot says, it appears this is an image of a pothole. So think about that. I didn't have to tell the bot that I just hit a pothole and I just took a picture of it and I want to report it. I just took a picture of the pothole and I sent it to the bot, and the bot was able to determine this person is contacting me because there's a pothole in the road. And the interesting thing about images, if the person has enabled location services on their phone, the image probably already has the GPS coordinates of where that image was taken. So with a little bit of smarts, we can determine what the image is, why the person is probably reporting it. This is a pothole. And we can collect the location tag out of the image, and we can just respond back maybe to the person saying, thank you for reporting this. We'll have someone go check it out. So they didn't have to say a word to the bot. Just the action of sending a pothole image took care of that. How about other interesting things we could do? Like, big cities a lot of times have issues with graffiti. So let's like this train, this poor train got tagged. So we upload a picture of this train, and look at that. It appears this is an image of vandalism. So it detected that this picture has vandalism in it, all using the Custom Vision API service. I didn't have to be a smart AI guy to make this work. And I'll show you how I made this work here in a moment. But isn't that kind of cool? Now, how about this? How about this one? This one here, and I know it's kind of hard to see, but let me open it up. That's graffiti too, right? But that's, a little different. It says this appears to be an image of graffiti, but it says, and it looks like it may be art. So if someone uploads this, the bot might just say, okay, yeah, you uploaded something that looks like graffiti and it's probably art. So you know what? We're going to put this on the low priority list for someone to go out and take a look at because it's probably not something we're concerned about. But if someone were to upload another image that looks like this, that's probably a problem. And we probably want to have somebody go out and take care of it. So this is going to say this appears to be graffiti and it looks to be vandalism. So we might send somebody out to go do that. Once again, we could pull out location information out of the image. If there's no location information in the image, the bot could then be programmed to prompt the user to provide additional information about maybe where this was taken, etc. So very, very cool process in that we can do. And I know that we're running a little short on time. We've only got about 15 minutes left, but I really want you to think about how difficult it is for a computer to understand what's in an image, because a computer just understands points of light with a specific intensity and a specific hue. And it has to take all of those individual points and reason over them to try to figure out what are you trying to tell it, or what is this an image of. It's unbelievable the amount of processing power and artificial intelligence that has to go into just making this happen. But for you, super easy. We come out here to something we call custom vision. So customvision.ai is the website. You can go out there, log in once again with a Microsoft account, and you can get started. Now, what you need to do is have a collection of images that you can train on. So what you see here on the screen is the collection of images that I have that I uploaded to train my bot. And you can see along the left, here are the different tags that I have defined for the different images that I've uploaded. So I've got art, graffiti, pothole, sinkhole, and vandalism. Now, one that I find interesting is what's really the difference between a pothole and a sinkhole? We would say it would be size, right? Scale, maybe the fact that you can see the earth underneath it. But how do you tell a computer that? That to me is just mind-blowing that a computer can tell the difference between a pothole and a sinkhole. And if I come over here, let's see, I think I've got an image of a sinkhole. So here's a sinkhole that my bot's never seen before, at least from a training perspective. And it identifies it as a sinkhole instead of a pothole. Even though it's round, circular, it's got dark colors in the center, it was able to figure out that this was a sinkhole. So the way that I do this, like I said, is I upload my training images. I create a series of tags by just coming over here and hit plus, and I name them whatever I want to name them. And then I just go image by image of my training set and basically say, this is a sinkhole. This is art, might be considered graffiti. This is graffiti and vandalism, graffiti and vandalism, graffiti and vandalism, etc. Pothole. And I go down through here, sinkhole, and I tag all of the images appropriately. And when I get done, I say train. And once I'm done with training, it will automatically publish an endpoint, just like Q&A Maker, where I can just send a link to where the image resides, and it will read the image, run it through the model, and then give back its prediction. So it'll basically say, I predict that these specific images have a specific percentage point of probability of being one of those things. So if I go over here to predictions, we can kind of see this a little bit. So if I choose like this, that sinkhole, it's 99% confident that it's a sinkhole, 99.9. So that's pretty darn confident. If I go to this, it was 100% confident it was graffiti, 99.9% confident it was art, 89.4% confident it was vandalism. So, it thought it might be vandalism because of the way that it was, but, it was below my threshold of, I think I set 90%. So it kind of ignored it. If I look at the train, 99.9% positive it's vandalism. Now it thinks that it's graffiti, but it wasn't so confident that it was a graffiti as the vandalism type. If I go over here, 100% graffiti and 100% vandalism. So it's more than perfectly confident that that's a problem. So it's kind of interesting to see how this machine learning algorithm can easily be trained to be able to identify those different items. So this is custom vision. Now, the final thing that I want to show you is LUIS, the Language Understanding and Intent Service. So LUIS can be accessed through LUIS.ai. Once again, sign in with a Microsoft account. You'll create what we call an app out here, and you just click Create New App and give it a name and a language culture that it's going to be in. And if I go into it, what you're going to see is that LUIS has what we call our intents and our entities. So here are two intents that I created. One is get conditions and get forecast. So get condition would be, I want to get the weather as it is today, right now, at this moment. Forecast is, I want to get the weather condition sometime in the future. So if I click on like get forecast, here are the different statements. What is the weather forecast for weather location? What is the weather in weather location this week? So see how we went through and we basically gave different statements on how someone might utter or how someone might enter in a question that would show the intent of getting the weather forecast. And then what's highlighted there are the entities. So once I've defined some intents, I can go back in and define the entities. The entities, if I remove that, you can see here originally the questions were, what is the weather for a forecast for Chicago, or what is the weather in Chicago this week, or what will the weather be tomorrow in Accord, New York? So what I did is went back in here, highlighted those, and said these are entities, and we're going to call these entities weather.location. Okay, so what ends up happening is when I send a statement to this service, once again, it's just a REST endpoint, just like any other service. So I send my statement to this service. The service is going to respond back and go, I'm this confident that the intent is weather.getForecast. And its entities, which include weather.location, is this value. And so now your bot knows what the person's intending to do and the values that you need to have in order to process that request. So LUIS is the way to make your bot smart and understand natural language. And it's, once again, very, very simple. I mean, the idea of coming out here and building out different intents and different entities is really quite simple. It's not that difficult at all. You want to create a new intent, you say create new intent, you give it a name. Maybe, I don't know, trying to think of something here. Weather get historical. So maybe we want to ask about the weather in the past. And then I don't have any utterances here. So what I can do is type something that somebody might say. So what was the weather in Chicago on December 12th, 2015? Okay, so what it's going to do is it adds it in there. Now it understood that Chicago was an entity that we'd already defined, right? It's a location, and it was smart enough to figure that out. It doesn't know that December 12th, 2015 is anything. So what I would need to do is define a new entity and tell it that it's a date, and then I could highlight that and say that that matches to a specific entity. So now I just added another intent. So if someone were to ask about historical weather for a location on a specific date, my bot would be smart enough to know, hey, you're asking for historical weather, and here's the location, and here's the date that you're asking about. And then the bot can go out, make the appropriate calls to the backend services to get that data and retrieve that back. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Let's jump back to the slide deck here real quick. All right. So how do we get started? How can you get started building bots? Well, number one, the best way to do it is Visual Studio 2017. If you don't have Visual Studio 2017 for your developers, you absolutely want to get it, because Visual Studio 2017 has all of the connection capabilities to do bots and all of the modern application development capabilities. It's almost a necessity. Once you have that, you want to install the Visual Studio bot templates. Or you can use a sample project that I've got located at aka.ms/govbotsample, which is basically a sample code that is already kind of built up. All you have to do is provide the Q&A maker endpoint and the key that's provided after you publish your Q&A maker piece. Plug that in there, and you've got a basic bot that's already ready to go to be able to answer stuff through Q&A maker. So that's a good way to start. Definitely install the bot framework emulator on your dev environment, because you're going to need that to be able to test your bots and kind of iterate on them as you're going through. Extend your bot with other things like Lewis or some of those cognitive services. And once you've got a bot that's doing what you want and you're ready to get it published, then you need to decide where you're going to put it. Are you going to host it on premises on a public endpoint? It has to be public facing. So on a public endpoint that exposes port 443 SSL, or are you going to host it in the cloud in like an Azure App Service plan? So you need to decide that and get it published. Once it's published, then you can go in to the Bot Builder, the Bot Framework, and register the bot through the bot framework, so that way you can connect it to all of those different endpoints, such as Skype, SMS, Slack, Facebook, Cortana, all of those different endpoints, and then your bot's live. So it's not that difficult to get a bot live. There's just a couple steps there that you have to go through. You have to make sure that you publish your bot to a public location, and then go into the Bot Builder bot framework, go into the bot framework and configure it to talk to your bot, and then you're good to go. So not that difficult to get started with, something that you can do relatively quick. I have some links here, the bot templates, the bot emulator, the sample project, and the bot framework. So these are the getting started links that you're going to need to have. So these are pretty much a necessity. Go ahead and make sure that you go hunt those up. If you don't copy down these links, I've got the slide deck. If you want the slide deck, go ahead and email me. My email address is very simple. Let me drop it in the chat window. mhacker@microsoft.com. I will email the slide deck directly to you if you just send me a quick email. And that way, you'll have all these links. You can just go ahead and click on them to get started. Okay. Once again, this video is going to be posted online in on-demand format. So if you don't get the presentation that way, of course, you could always watch the video and copy them down out of the video later. And then finally, SLG events. We're going to have more of those, like I talked about. So please go out there to the website and register. And we hope to see you on future events. I know we've got about 3 minutes left. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to take any questions and answer them if you just want to drop them into the IM window. If not, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending today, and I appreciate the time that you spent with me, and I hope you have a great weekend. All right, I see Tyler is typing a message here. When using Lewis, do you need any context besides location and date when searching for something? So it depends, Tyler. It depends on what your intent is. So you have to think about what is the bot trying to accomplish. So for example, if the bot's trying to go look up something in like a Secretary of State system, maybe about driver's license renewal, you actually might need like the person's name or some other personally identifiable information to identify who they are. So in Lewis, You might have multiple intents, multiple entities, which would be additional pieces of information that you need in order to submit it to your backend systems to get the response that you want. So think about it that way. And I think that's one of the hardest things with bots is that bots are not smart. Let's just put it that way. Bots by themselves are not smart. You have to make them smart. So you need to think about what is the purpose of your bot. How should a person interact with the bot? So what's kind of the story behind what your bot does? And think about the types of questions people are going to ask about it, and then start adding those capabilities. That's why the FAQ piece, the Q&A maker and doing FAQs is a good place to start, because you can get some of the basic interactions going on, and then you could extend your bot beyond that based upon maybe logging questions that your bot's not able to answer through the Q&A maker. So maybe what you do is every time a person asks a question, you log it into a backend system someplace, maybe a database or something, so someone can go back in and review and say, here are the questions that the bot wasn't able to answer. And then you can say, okay, these the types of things that we want to be able to handle, and are they something that can be handled by Q&A maker? If not, maybe what we need to do is then extend it by using Lewis, and now for that specific thing that we want to do, that would be the intent. What are the other pieces of information that we need to collect from the user in order to be able to process that request? And those would be the different entities that you would define inside of Lewis. Brandy, how can we use the intent entities to allow the bot to ask the customer to be more specific? So that is actually a challenging one, to be honest with you. What you would end up doing is you could have Lewis understand the intent, and if the specific entity did not come back that you need in order to process the request, then you would have to have your bot then ask them to be more specific. So basically what would happen is the person would enter in their question, you send it off to Lewis. Lewis is going to come back and say, here's the intent that I'm confident about, but there was no entities. So your bot's going to say, well, if this intent came back, I need to have these entities and they're not there. So now I'm going to prompt the person to respond maybe again. I might prompt them to say, could you please also include this, or could you please give me this piece of information? So then your bot can continue down the appropriate logic path. So that's pretty much how I'd handle that. That make sense? I know we're pushing right up to the time, so we'd want to be very careful. So where do we enter the second question? So so basically, Brandy, is once you've got that response back and you have the intent in your code, you just basically probably do an if statement. If it's this intent, but this entity that we're looking for came back blank or null because it didn't come back, then in that spot, you would then write back out to the bot output window, basically the response, basically saying, could you please provide this additional piece of information? And then have them enter it in and then capture that. So there's a little bit of tracking that you have to do from what we call state management, so that you can understand at what point in the conversation is the person at. No, you can't really use Lewis directly for that, or Q&A maker directly for that, because Lewis is strictly for doing understanding of the language. So what is the person asking for, and trying to match that with the intent and the entities. And then it's up to you and your bot to decide how you want to handle that, whether you got all the entities back that you needed or not. Q&A maker, as you've seen, is pretty much just a strictly, here's a question, here's an answer. There's no way to say, here's a question, and then for the answer, ask them another question, or to clarify, and then get the right piece in there. So you'd have to have a lot of that logic built into your bots. And really, that's where the complexity of all this comes in, is that you really have to think about what is it that your bot's going to really do. Don't try to make your bot do everything, especially not your first try through. Start with Q&A Maker, get the basics, and then start doing what you're talking about there though. Let's experiment a little bit with Lewis and see if we can get a way to handle some basic phrases. And then, maybe your first pass is if the entity comes back and it's blank, just maybe the output back to the person is I didn't understand what you were trying to accomplish. I believe you wanted to do this, but you did not tell me this piece of information. Could you please ask the question again? Maybe something like that. So that way you don't have to do this whole branching logic trying to figure out or ask them to respond, with the specific entity information that you need and track all of the state and stuff like that of the conversation. You could just ask, basically ask them, please restate the question. That might be the next step. And then once you've got that working, then you could start adding the additional tracking logic to say, okay, here's where the person is within the conversation. And because they didn't answer or ask the question with all the appropriate piece of information, we can prompt them again. And when they respond with that appropriate information, we already know where they're at in the conversation. So we can jump to that section of code to kind of continue on. So there's lots of that logic that can really add complexity to building your bots, but you need to really think through what that conversation is going to feel like and look like. The other thing that we've learned too, and I know we're going over on time, so I apologize, and I really thank you for sticking around here, is that make sure you think about that conversation aspect and what to do in situations where you can't give an answer. Are you just going to say sorry? Or are you going to direct them to maybe another website? Are you going to direct them to an email address, a phone number? Maybe they can call to get more information, because you want to have that warm handoff. If you can't do something, then you want to hand it off. You want your bot to feel natural, but you don't want to have a situation where people find the bot that it's just not useful. If every time they ask a question, they're not getting an answer, then they're going to get frustrated and they're not going to want to use it. But if you've defined your bot and you set expectations up front of what that bot does, because maybe the bot resides on a very specific page of your website or in a very specific area, or maybe above it, it explains that the bot can help answer questions about these specific topics, then people are more likely to feel comfortable with interacting with it. And they will ask the appropriate questions of the bot to get the answers back instead of just asking a bunch of random stuff that the bot will never be able to answer. So you got to kind of think about that whole, once again, conversation flow and setting expectations to the user. Another interesting thing that we found too is make sure that when you build your bots, a lot of people like to give their bots names, unique names. And what we found is if you give a bot a human-like name, that's very human, and some people will even do avatars. If the avatar looks human, like a person, and the name's human, people have a much higher expectation of what that bot can do than if you have a cartoon character and some nonsense name for it, or some fun name that's not really a human name. If you do that, then people have a bit lower expectation of what the bot can actually do, and sometimes we'll interact with it more appropriately. So think about those types of things too as you are approaching building your bot. So once again, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. This was a great turnout. I really appreciate it. I hope to see everybody on future SLG events website, or Azure Friday events, SLG event and SLG Azure Friday events. Please go out to the SLG events website, check out all the other ones that we've got going on. Please register for them. We can only keep doing these if we keep having good attendance on them. So please send this information out to anybody else within your organization that you think might find any of this useful. And with that, I guess I will wish everybody a very happy Friday and hope you guys have a great weekend. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. Thank you very much and have a great day.